Welcome, 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 everybody. It's so nice to see a lovely audience here in Saskatoon. How's everybody feeling today? Sounds good. Okay, awesome. Well, it's so nice to have you. My name is Laura Negraeff, and I will be your host for this evening. I'm very excited to be joined here with the audience here and on the stream, as well as our audience at the Artesian in Regina. As many of you know, if you've joined us before or if this is your first time, we always like to start our show with a land acknowledgement. And tonight, I gave a lot of thought as to what that meant to me and to us at this time. So I'll share a little bit about myself, just a little bit about how some of my family came to this land and sort of what that means to me to acknowledge that and the importance of it. So we don't do the rote sort of scripted thing. We talk about what is our relationship to land, what are our obligations, and how do we come to this space. And so being a Negraeff, that's a Russian Doukhobor name, and that's my married name that my children carry. And the Russian Doukhobor Negraeffs, they actually came to Saskatchewan in the late 1800s. They came as conscientious objectors to mandatory military service. So Canada opened their doors and allowed them to create a home where they settled in eastern Saskatchewan with many other families, many of them Ukrainian. And it was a place where they were able to be safe and to feel a sense of freedom, and where they established roots that continue to this day. What's hard for me is also reconciling that at that same time, residential schools were being built in that same area, and just a week and a half ago, 54 unmarked graves were confirmed in that same region, just right next door to where my family established their home. So when I think about freedom, which is our theme for tonight, when I think about relationships, friendships, community, I think about those conflicting relationships. The fact that with Russian ancestry, having good friends, family members, community members who are also Ukrainian, and also to my Indigenous friends, family, and community members, it's a really difficult time that we're all in, as I'm sure you're well aware. So I just wanted to acknowledge that today and to share a little bit about myself and how I come to this work and this place, and also just to express my gratitude. I chose to wear this scarf today that some people refer to as a Kukum scarf, and I did so because it brings me hope, because these scarves, as many have shared, originate from Ukrainian ancestry and people, and they brought these from Europe and oftentimes traded or sold them to Indigenous community members and friends, and they became a symbol of resilience and matriarchy, and so many things that we celebrate today. So I wanted to wear this just as a reminder of where we come from and the fact that everything's connected. So the challenges that my ancestors experienced and that my friends and their ancestors experienced still are impacting the world today. And so I want to start the program just by saying that I'd be remiss if I didn't say that in a night where we're talking about freedom, our hearts are very much with the Ukrainian people, and we really hope for an end to the war and the violence that's happening there today. So with that, I'm going to invite you to think tonight about what is freedom. And we're going to explore that through art tonight and think about all the different ways that freedom is understood. And I want you to think about the different connections that has for you, for your community, for your family, and the people that you care about. So to do that, we're going to turn it over to Regina, where my colleague Sarah Bergbush is standing by, ready to introduce the first artist of the night, John Lepke.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Sarah.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am well. Yeah, so our first artist of the night is John Lepke. He is a member of the community arts organization from Regina called Listen to Dis. And Listen to Dis is the only disability-led arts organization in Saskatchewan. So I feel really lucky that we're able to include them in this show tonight. And John is a really amazing artist, and he is pursuing his MBA currently at the University of Regina, and he used to play wheelchair basketball and wheelchair rugby, and on a national level, which is really interesting. And yeah, I'd like to ask John more about how that has informed his arts practice, because I think he has some interesting anecdotes about that. And he's going to tune in
Sure.
on the VMix. Oh, he's here.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
John. Welcome to the show. I was just telling
Thank you for having me and us.
You're welcome. I was just telling the crowd here and in Saskatoon that you used to play wheelchair basketball and rugby. Is that correct?
I did. As I used to tell people, I had fun hitting other disabled people for fun.
Nice. Cool.
That is my job description in rugby anyway.
So tonight, John, you have prepared a rant for us. Could you speak a little bit about sort of what inspired you to write the rant and what freedom means to you, and yeah, what we can expect from your rant?
Absolutely. What inspired me was when we talk about freedom, we don't always talk about the intricacies, the small ways in which freedom can exist. And in the current moment that we're in, both with the war in Ukraine and previous to that, and currently going on in our country, the convoy to Ottawa and these sort of grand pronouncements about what freedom means inspired me to think about it from a disability cultural lens, thankfully through the work of Listen to Dis. And, you know, in much the same way that MC was talking about land acknowledgement, also really important for us to remember that disability culture and disability knowledge is owes a great debt to both Indigenous culture and particularly Black cultural history. So that's also part of the freedom that we're talking about.
Okay, interesting. Thanks, John. Do you have a title for your rant?
I do. It's called Fuck Freedom, Let's Talk About Survival.
Cool. I like it.
Well, yeah.
bold.
And if we're ready, I can begin.
Yeah, thanks for speaking about, well, I guess one more thing before you begin. Thanks
Yeah,
for
sure.
speaking about how, yeah, disability culture has taken a lot and been influenced by Indigenous culture. And yeah, thanks for sharing that. I didn't know that. Take it away, John.
Thank you. Fuck freedom. Let's talk about survival. How can you dream of freedom when survival is all you've been left with? Like little crumbs at the end of a meal you're supposed to be thankful for. That's the question posed across many sectors of the disability community in our current moment. Many of us don't have marriage equality. We don't have access to a just medical system. Some days we can't get out of our house because the sidewalk isn't clear and our food budget is zilch. We can't go to the hospital for mental health care for fear of abuse. We can't trust the state's apparatus to hold us towards health. Disabled people across North America were buying wedding rings in the midst of the pandemic, pretending to be married because they knew, we know, that our lives are more valuable during triage if we are believed to be going home to someone who has more societal value. I mean, for fuck's sake, Tommy Douglas was originally a eugenicist. There's a little piece of Saskatchewan history you probably didn't want to know about. This shit isn't new. Ableism is baked into our democracy, into every facet of public life. It's in the head pats that some local disabled researchers get when they wheel down a hallway. It's in the province's only recourse against discrimination being a human rights process that is glacially paced. It's in all the "we don't hire people like you here" sentiments, but it also rears its ugly head when lefties, artists, and thinkers say, well, I'm a nice person, so I don't even see what's wrong with you. We're over that, aren't we? All this ableism business? Once you see it, feel it in your bones, finally sit with it, it becomes harder and harder to deny. It's like when someone sits in a wheelchair having never done so before. Maybe they need it at whatever stage of life they're in, or maybe they've borrowed it from a friend for a bit of joyriding. Either way, sit in a wheelchair in most parts of Regina and you will start rolling without ever having to use your hands. Your feet probably couldn't discern that slight difference in elevation, but those wheels sure can. So many suffer from main character syndrome, their particular version of freedom being the only one that matters, that's supposedly worth fighting for. But when certain people talk about freedom as a general concept, I'm often tempted, as the argumentative and loud cripple that I am, to ask what they mean in the same way you ask a misogynistic dude bro to explain his awful jokes. So can you lay out for me why that joke that made fun of your girlfriend was funny? Well, want another drink? Can you lay out for me how your freedom is intersectional? How are you supporting people other than you? Freedom! To be clear, this isn't just a non-disabled know-nothing problem. The transphobic governor of Texas is a wheelchair user. Madison Cawthorn, the American congressman who is at best a Nazi sympathizer, is also disabled. Our community needs to own this too. So, my apologies if I'm not particularly forgiving of those who scream freedom while trying to burn an apartment building down. For those who bellow racist slurs in the name of some disillusioned crusade. Freedom isn't threatening politicians, journalists, fellow citizens, or anyone you happen to disagree with. It's not causing a scene that prevents an ambulance from reaching its destination. That's called terrorism. It's hard to survive in the midst of all this, to hold on to community, to share what little resources are available to make our current reality just a little more bearable. The pandemic has shown that disabled people are, on the whole, as unwanted as ever. The Saskatchewan government gave Saskatchewan Assured Income for Disability, SAID, recipients $50 for COVID more than a year ago. What would you buy with $50? A single box of N95s is more than that. But that's what counts as support in this province. A drop in the bucket, a tone-deficient spit in the face. They've clawed back CERB, which, by the way, was far more than any average disability payment in Canada. They've pretended to care, parroting the current company line that it's only the unvaccinated who are at risk, something that is demonstrably untrue according to the latest medical research. What survival meant 2 years ago is radically different to what it entails now. Not that our provincial leadership understands that. They think everything is a back-to-work program. I am a working crip, and I, for one, would love some rest during a set of global catastrophes. But during those catastrophes, disabled people are always left behind. Wildfires, winter storms, medical equipment malfunctions, European warfare instigated by a Russian dictator. In every case, disabled people are faced with no answers to impossible questions. So, until those parading to Ottawa in some sort of perverse carnival understand the intricacies of true oppression in this country, until they stop their yapping and make a choice to protect people, I suggest they keep the word freedom out of their fucking mouths. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. That was fantastic.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody. So that was John Lepke and our first artist of the night. And first of all, I just want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors. It's because of sponsors like the David Nedney Fund for the Arts, Sask Arts, the Canadian Council for the Arts, Hardly Art, lots of art organizations out here supporting our artists. It's because of these organizations, as well as the Broadway Theater, the Artesian in Regina. These folks are what allow us to pay our artists to be able to have a venue where we can open our doors for free to our community. They're what allow us to stream online so that you, our at-home audience, can safely watch from wherever it is that you are. And so we're extremely grateful to those wonderful sponsors that are helping support the work of our artists.
Freedom!
Freedom for who?
Freedom from responsibility! Freedom from the oppressed!
Okay.
Freedom for freedom! Regardless of freedom! We stand senselessly strong and noble!
Oh, okay, thank you.
We're here for freedom!
All right. So,
Freedom from the oppressed! Freedom from responsibility! Freedom for freedom! Regardless of freedom, we stand senselessly strong and noble.
You need a lot of love and compliance. You need a lot of. You need a lot of love and compliance. You need a lot of freak show. Here we go. Welcome to the 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 freak show. Here we go. Love, love.
Do we wanna go sit down and watch the rest of the show?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm being told that was Kazam Dance Company. So that was that. And moving right along, as I was saying before I was interrupted, that we have many wonderful partners who help us to bring this programming throughout the province. We have partnered with groups in North Battleford, PA, Regina, Saskatoon, obviously. We've got partners all over the province, and we're able to work with them. Unfortunately, because of some of the conditions around COVID and things like that, we haven't been able to gather physically with some of our friends at Lyric and Spark and Battleford community players as we like, but we are still thinking of them and connecting with them, and we look forward to working together face-to-face again very soon. But one of those partners, as you know, and we saw them earlier, is Some Theatre Regina. So for the next part of our program, we're going to flip right back to them. So Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Hello, Sarah.
Hello. So for this next segment of our show, I'm pleased to present a music video that was created by Listen to Dis and their resident band. And it was created by the members of the theater company, and you'll notice some familiar faces in it, probably, such as Bongani Musa and Amanda Zielinski, who've both appeared on an episode of The Last Sunday previously. And the music video is, it grew out of themes of experiencing pleasure in the body and what that means as somebody who lives in a body that is othered or a disabled body. And the music video is called Sea of Love, and I think there are some sensual aspects to the video and song, and it's the hope of the artist who created it that this will provide like an intimate understanding of the extraordinary beauty that lives within all of our bodies, especially bodies who are othered and bodies who are disabled. And it's great to include. I'm really pleased that we're including this video in our episode about freedom, because I think it's a wonderful reflection on the pleasure and enjoyment that we find in all shapes and sizes of bodies. Yeah, please enjoy.
So moving along comes to the headliner of our show every evening. So once a month, every last Sunday of the month, we feature what Joel often says is probably the brand newest play. He doesn't say it like that, but the newest play in the world. So you are very fortunate tonight to be seeing a play written by Madeline Dahlem, and it's being performed tonight by Kent Allen, Lisa Bayless, and Jason Ewan. Please put your hands together for Socrates Must Die.
Welcome to This Is Your Country debate. The resolution before the House is, be it resolved that Socrates must die. Audience of the House, you are the judges. Each side will present a constructive speech, after which you will vote on who has the best argument and best persuaded you. Debaters, remember, you must define the terms which are significant to your argument. The purpose of a debate is to find a positive solution through critical thinking. Debate includes careful, respectful listening. We are following the rules of parliamentary debate, which means that debaters can ask a question at any time and that heckling is permitted, provided it is witty and quick. All righty. Affirmative. To you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The resolution before us is, be it resolved that Socrates must die. In the context of this debate, Socrates represents the Canadian government. Why must Socrates die? Because the present government is contemptuous of the average Canadian citizen. The protesters are some of those hard-working Canadians that Trudeau pretends to care about, but his government has taken too many actions without even the pretense of democracy. His government sat for only 38 days in 2021, and it didn't return to the House with any urgency after a completely useless general election.
Question. Why pick on Socrates? He represents rational thought and careful thinking. This is represented by neither the federal government nor the Freedom Convoy.
May I remind the negative that the affirmative has an absolute right to define the terms of the debate? But anyways, since you ask. In ancient Greece, private citizens had the right to bring fellow citizens to trial. Socrates was upsetting the public good. He was brought to trial and convicted. And that is what the Freedom Convoy is doing, putting Trudeau on trial.
Question. Please define the word freedom. It seems central to the issue.
Freedom is the absolute right to do what I believe is right for me and mine. I will no longer be ignored.
Mr. Chairman, the affirmative is proposing anarchy. If each and every citizen of our country is committed only to what is best for him or her or them, there is no common purpose. And Socrates understood that. I refuse to accept the affirmative's definition of freedom. Freedom must be defined within the context of a free and open society with democratically elected governments.
1 in 5 voted for Trudeau. 1 out of 5.
More than would vote for you. But the freedom of individuals is real, but is circumscribed by the desire to do no harm to their fellow citizens, whose right to freedom equals theirs. And if Socrates were alive today, he would insist on the proper definition and understanding of the words which underpin our democracy.
Good Lord. Mr. Chairman, I got lost in that word soup.
Too many letters?
I will assume my definition of freedom and proceed to my main argument on why Socrates must die. Our Prime Minister, our very own Socrates, is contemptuous, ignorant. He referred to legitimate protesters as a few people shouting and waving swastikas. His government passed mandates without the approval of the people. And I quote from CanadaUnity.com. We, the people, have endured an unprecedented assault on our God-given freedoms. These freedoms are hard-won and defended through the blood and treasure of the generations who came before us.
Question. You are clearly referring to the soldiers who fought on behalf of our country in foreign wars.
Yes. Your question?
My question is, weren't those soldiers putting the common good ahead of their own personal freedoms? They gave their lives for these as yet undefined freedoms which you are claiming.
The truckers are acting for the common good. Like those brave soldiers, they are taking action.
From the comfort of their trucks.
The federal government has removed our basic freedoms without adequate justification because of unsubstantiated, obstinate fear.
Question. Do you not think 36,000 Canadian deaths from COVID to be a substantiated reason for mask and vaccine mandates?
I don't believe those statistics. To conclude, be it resolved that Socrat must die. Our ivory towered, entitled Socrat, was elected by less than 20% of the Canadian electorate. He does not represent me. We must put an end to left-wing, liberal, namby-pamby protectionism. We own our own bodies. Our children are our own to protect in our own way. Our governments are not listening to us. We must reclaim our freedom. And we have. Thank you.
Thank you, affirmative. I will now ask the negative to present his case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, I mean just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. In my opponent's definition of freedom, you actually find the definition of license. Now, license is the freedom to behave as one wishes, especially in a way which results in excessive or unacceptable behavior.
Talking truckers here, licenses.
The border blockades have clearly been excessive and unacceptable behavior. But
it worked.
The occupation of Ottawa has clearly infringed upon the charter rights of Ottawa citizens, to wit, the right to security of person, the right to not be subject to cruel and unusual punishment, such as the blaring of air horns at all hours.
And worse than a needle in the arm?
Honorable judges, the affirmative has rightly pointed out that Prime Minister Trudeau was elected by less than 20% of Canadian voters. I would like to point out to my honorable opponent that the same percentage of Canadians are holding the rest of the country hostage by refusing to get vaccinated. That choice is by a self-entitled bunch of selfish Canadian-affected veterans, the elderly, the immunocompromised, the school children, the disabled, as we heard so eloquently this evening. People helpless to protect themselves because of a minority group's insistence on their freedom.
So stay home. Everybody stays home.
I wish you would have. Honorable judges, I am here before you to argue that Socrates must not die. Historically, Socrates died by poisoning.
From his vaccine.
If he were alive today, he would wonder at the Humpty Dumpty virtual universe where words have lost their meaning, where the idea of community is lost, where people have realigned themselves according to ideology, and ideology is expressed in hollow, ringing phrases that do not stand under national scrutiny. We need for Socrates to be alive today, for democracies to survive. We need for every citizen to use reason, to ask rational questions. We need to be clear in the words we choose
Humpty Dumpty,
to
speak
use.
white.
Order.
Truck off.
Order.
Truck
Order.
out.
Truck you.
No, order. Stop it! I must remind both speakers that heckles should not lower the discourse. We are here to explore an issue democratically, fairly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In preparing for this debate, Mr. Chairman, I perused the material posted on the freedomconvoy.ca website, and I fear, Mr. Chairman, that these freedom fighters have confused a street fair with legitimate political protest. From Winnipeg, we learn that Freedom Friday will be followed by Family Fun Day, with a huge outdoor obstacle course.
Yeah, with trucks.
Children's entertainer, craft tables, cookie decorating, and more. The Fredericton Freedom Fighters are sponsored by Vibe Entertainment, barbecue and hot chocolate available. Ottawa has hot tubs and bouncy castles. And CanadaUnity.com, also quoted by my honorable opponent, wants to make it easy. Drive through your town and show others that you stand for freedom. Why not protest from the comfort and warmth of your vehicle? It couldn't be easier. Unlike the greatest generation, we're not being asked to storm a beach under gunfire.
Question, are you saying that making it fun makes the protest less genuine?
I am saying that a protest which has turned into an occupation, which has caused great economic and emotional hardship to innocent bystanders and legitimate businesses, is not a tailgate party. I am saying that a protest where the participants are in effect hiding inside their vehicles is not genuinely democratic and is truly not courageous.
But Trudeau can hide at Harrington Lake.
In conclusion, honorable judges, because the affirmative has selfishly subverted the word freedom, she has proven beyond all doubt why Socrates must not die.
Socrates.
Speakers, thank you for your constructive speeches. If we have longer than 10 minutes at our disposal, we would proceed to rebuttal and find out if you really listen to each other's arguments. But instead, we will go straight to the audience and ask them to choose the strongest case. Would all those in favor of the affirmative stand? Would all those in favor of the negative stand?
Well, well. There we have it. Yes.
The debate has been won by negatives.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was an excellent debate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's have one more round of applause for the newest play in the world. Wonderful job, everyone. Thank you so much. So, for those of you at home that couldn't see what the audience was doing, it seemed that it was pretty decisive that Socrates must not die. So, that's good news for Socrates, I guess. So, for our final artist feature for the evening, we're going to throw it back to Regina, where my colleague Joel Birnbaum is standing by with our special guest. Joel, are you there?
I'm here, Laura.
Hello,
Good to see
Joel.
everyone in Saskatoon. Thank you so much. We've got a great crowd here in Regina, and I'm so grateful that we have our interview guest this evening in the hot seat interview chair. We like to call it the hot seat because we jump around. The Canada Research Chair in Socially Engaged Theatre here at the University of Regina on Treaty 4 territory, Mr. Taiwo Afolabi, everyone. Taiwo.
Thanks, Joe.
Taiwo, I thought we'd start right where we left off with some of the art pieces that you've seen already this evening and start with the word freedom. If I give you the word freedom and ask you to finish the thought, freedom is, where would you take that?
Freedom is nuanced, context, it's responsibility, it's confusing. It's not, well, do I need to add more?
It's up to you, you're the interviewee. What's the opposite of freedom?
It's not one thing. It's not necessarily right, a right. It's not bullying. What else? Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Great answers so far. We always like to get to know our interview subject a little bit. So could you tell us, when you were like 4 years old, did you want to be a Canada Research Chair in Socially Engaged Theatre? Like, was that kind of your dream, or what did you want to be when you were 4 years old?
Interestingly, I wanted to go into media because I love to ask questions. I love to talk to people. I didn't choose theater. Theater chose me, as I always say. And interestingly, when it comes to theater in my country I'm coming from, back in those days, theater used to have a bad rap around it. Well, a lot of folks in theater are poor, by the way.
What?
Thanks to Nollywood, that has kind of opened things up economically. And so I wanted to go into journalism. I wanted to do mass communications and things like that.
At age 4.
Oh, age 4. I didn't know what I was going to do.
I was like, this guy wants to be in mass communications at age 4. At age 4, I'm like, sand tastes good.
I've jumped many years ahead. Age 4, I had no idea. I can't even remember.
Right, no problem. I'm just giving you a hard time.
This is really hot seat now.
We're turning the heat up here, Taiwo. You mentioned your country. Where was your home country before you joined us here in Canada?
Nigeria. So I came to Canada in 2015.
Okay.
And then I was in Victoria for 5 years before I moved down here with my family.
So Nigeria, Victoria, Canada, is freedom different in those, Regina, is freedom different depending where you live?
I think so, and I think that's why I say freedom is nuance. It's full of a lot of context. I think that, and also that's why I say freedom is not necessarily a right, because I think that we're so much full of it's my right, it's my right, it's my right, and knowing that freedom comes with responsibility. So a little bit about Nigeria was colonized by Britain, had its independence in 1960. So the idea of freedom is different from what we can consider as freedom here. Freedom first from the colonizer, freedom to be able to speak my language. I didn't grow up speaking my language in school. The whole idea was to English files, as we always say. And then you go to the Francophone African countries pretty next to us. You know, they were colonized by France, and they still speak French up to now. The freedom was really about taking independence from the imperial leader and all that. And then when we got the independence in 1960, we're also talking about another kind of freedom, where it's freedom from our own shackles that we've put ourselves in, from military government to corrupt leaders to different things like that. And then you come to Canada, it's a different context, right? Of course, we know that there's a common denominator, colonialism and all of that, but then when we bring the indigenous, realities, the residential school and all stuff, it changes. But I think for me, at the heart of it is really liberating the human from the clogs that we've created ourselves. And I think for me, that's really what it's all about. It's not necessarily about, well, it's my right, it's your right, but it's the common denominator is giving understanding one another as human beings. So when I was just chatting with someone some couple of days ago, and they said it was the time they got to Canada that they felt that they were black first time in their 45 years. All right, so where they were in Nigeria, they didn't really think like that, and they just moved to Canada just a couple of months ago, and I think they should be heading to 50 years now, and they said this is the first time they felt black.
Wow.
Right? So, which is interesting. So when we now talk about freedom in the context of Canada, that's why the nuance comes into play, the context comes into play in terms of the common denominator for me is what we may be fighting for may be different, but at the heart of it is recognizing that we're human beings and that regardless of where we come from or we're going to and all that, that's a common denominator, the humanness of us.
Powerful, powerful point. As always, we have time for questions, both from the audience here in Regina, the audience in Saskatoon, on the chat. Just put in your question to the chat if you're watching on the live stream, and our artistic associate, Crystal Peterson, will text me questions. I love this point about being a human being, and it's the first time I've understood the term common denominator too, because I'm horrible at math, so thank you for breaking that down for me. Any questions at this point from anyone here in Regina? Any questions? Why do people, you referenced freedom is not a right in your mind. Why do you think people call it a right or put their hands into that term so strongly?
Well, I think, and I'll try as much as possible not to go into any theoretical jargon here. I am a human being. It is who I am. You don't have to tell me that. The moment you start telling me that, you start giving me the idea that I have to let you know that I should speak, you're taking something away from me. And we live in a world where it's always about my right, we feel that sense of entitlement. I should be able to speak within the context that it's not going to hurt you. You don't have to tell me that shut up and keep quiet there, or whatever belongs to all of us, somebody is taking it. For me, when it comes to the idea of right, and I think that's with a lot of the challenges that we're having right now, we're thinking it's my right. No, it's not. It's not. That's why I said it's not necessarily right. When we look at it from the perspective that I am a human being, with that comes every reality and giving space for me and for others to flourish. That's for me, it's taking it from the realm of right, or, oh, this is my right. No, it's putting it to the level of relationship and responsibility. It's bringing it to the level of reciprocity, that it's not about how I look. Why must it be that because I am black or because I'm indigenous, and then you feel like I'm less logical, or I'm inferior? Then I have to fight for it. I have to fight for recognition. That then means that I'm fighting for something that I should not fight for if you see me as a human being. That's why I'm fighting for right. The whole idea of freedom, part of the historical reality, is the freedom of human beings, the freedom, right to speak, right to this, right to that. I'm just reminded of George Orwell, Animal Farm, right? Every one of us we should be equal. We're human beings. You have the blood flowing in your stream. But then the moment we think that this separates me from this, whether by beautiful dance, the sea of love, whether by how I look or my ableism or whatever, the moment we start moving into that realm, then we shorten other people. Then I have to fight for something. I don't have to fight for it. I am a human being. I should be able to talk. I should go somewhere,
But where does that entitlement come from? Because you're saying entitlement is getting in the way of that?
Exactly.
Entitlement is getting in the way of us all being in a relationship?
And recognizing the other. Recognizing that you're a human being just as I am, whether you're white or my 3-year-old who say nobody's white. It's like, you're fair, not white. Well, let's have that conversation anyway. But then we have been indoctrinated, whether by means of socialization, media, the curriculum, and things like that, that there is a supremacy somewhere, there is a dominance somewhere. We're not coming back to that idea that there is a common denominator. We're human beings, and so that entitlement is being, whether we're aware or not, conscious or not, we're kind of schooled in that way, that each time we come to a room, there's this aura of entitlement, there's this aura of arrogance, that the other person now need to say, hey, I'm here now. Well, you can't talk to me like that. You can't be misogynistic to your wife. You can't say that. You can't say. But what if we understand that it's not about my right, it's not about my entitlement, knowing that we're human beings. As human beings, relationship is critical. Reciprocity is critical. One of the things that my parents taught me when we were growing up is you have to treat others how you want them to treat you.
Yes.
So if you don't treat me well, whether on the basis of economy, on the basis of race, on the basis of whatever, you don't treat me right, you don't treat the other person right, don't expect the right treatment. And this may look very simple, but if we bring that to every detail of what we do, then it becomes a relationship rather than entitlement or feeling like, oh, I have to fight for this, I have to fight for that.
Yes, this idea of having to fight for. We're going to come back to that. Any questions at this time here in Regina? Yes, question from the front row, and I will repeat the question just so the folks on the broadcast can hear it, but if you could ask your question first.
Hi, good to see you again.
I'm curious, because these days it's very popular to not talk about we're all humans, but rather these days it's popular to say we have to recognize color. We shouldn't be colorblind. We shouldn't strive to treat everyone the same. We need to recognize difference. And you seem to be saying something different, or am I misunderstanding it?
Just before Tyrell responds, I'm going to paraphrase your question. Thank you for your question. Just this idea that these days, it seems like, if I'm getting it right, we need to recognize difference. Difference is important. Diversity is important. We are all different. We need to have it's Black History Month. We're recognizing the Black history this month. We have land acknowledgements. But you're advocating for we're all one, we're all human, or is this misunderstood?
I think that what I'm saying here, again, I'm going to go back to the idea of nuance, because I think when people use that, most of the time when people say, well, I don't see color and all of that, there are other elements to it. What I'm advocating for, I'm speaking to, is that I'm not saying we should not recognize color. That's important, because from a historical perspective, when I come to the room and I know that there have been some people or some race or, whatever faction we say, that they have been silence over time. I need to recognize that and then say, how do I bring myself to that point of understanding and making people know that this should not be where human beings, we should treat ourselves with dignity. So when I get to a room, when it involves me to recognize color, I need to do that. I need to say, hey, there's a history here. A lot of folks, that were not born in Canada, they never read. Many people did not even know about the residential school system until some of us got here, and then we were reading a lot and realized that what on earth? How can that be? So when I enter a room and I see who are those that are there, I ask myself, what do I need to do to bring to the fore the idea that I'm saying now, that we're human beings and we need to treat ourselves, with dignity. If it means at that point in time recognizing the historical realities in place, I need to do that. If there are times that it's not necessary, I'm not going to play that card. So I think it's really important to understand the context of where the conversation is, who are those in the room, and for me, maybe all these my ideas also come from working in community.
Yes.
As a researcher, when I go to community, I don't just bring books and Bible and start writing, because I'm going to create class system immediately. But there are some communities I go to that when I get there, everybody will speak English. I was doing a project in Iran some couple of years ago. I can't go into the space and start speaking English like this, or go to, not because people don't understand English, but how are we going to communicate? How do we come to that same point? If recognizing the historical realities in that space is what is needed to make the humanness come to the surface, then we have to do that. So I think it's nuance. I have to say there are times that people say, well, I don't recognize color. I'm like, no, you need to stop saying that, because you're hurting somebody. It's like you're saying, I don't even see all the years of brutality, of criminalization and things like that. I can keep going on and on and on. But I do hope that, I can bring that.
What's impressive is that I asked you what freedom was off the top, and you said nuance and context, and he's actually remembered what he said right off the top, right? So he's a real professor. I want to know, you're the Canada Research Chair in socially engaged theater. So what role does theater have to play in this discussion of moving towards human beingness, if I can call it that? What is theater's role in your mind?
In my opinion, I think that my role as a theater person in theater is really to create space for dialogue. I think that we still, as much as practitioners and artists, we're trying our best, I still feel that we still need to create more space, not necessarily in terms of number, but space where we're hearing and listening to one another.
I love the concept, and I don't disagree with you, but part of my job is to be an agitator. So what do you say to someone who says, you say you're creating space, but really, your project as a researcher, as a theater researcher, is you're coming into my community and you're extracting, you're taking. You're going to benefit from this as an academic. Have you had this? Have you walked into this room before?
Absolutely. It's just less than a week ago. One thing I always say is that these feelings are genuine, they are real, and people say them not because they want to say them, but because it's been experienced before. And whether I like it or not, I'm going to be looked at from the lens of the person that came before me. It's my responsibility to change that perspective. Whether I do it very well, that's a total game. But that's a different conversation. In my own work, I always talk about ethics of engaging in community.
And what's ethics mean to you in one sentence?
Well, this is really hot.
We turned up the heat there, yeah.
Well,
one sentence.
I always say ethics means doing things right at a certain time, in a certain place, with a certain people.
It's a good sentence. You used a few commas, but no, I like it. I like it because you come back to context, right?
Context.
Your ethics may change.
Exactly. The way I always say it is that ethics may be the same, but how you do ethics differs. So I have been very privileged to work in over 15 countries across 4 continents, and each time I go to each community, it's different. I just mentioned Iran some couple of minutes ago. I worked in Burkina Faso, where they speak French and I don't speak French. Or I've worked in China, I've worked in Denmark, where they even don't speak my language. But then I can't say the way I did it. What I want to do is I want to ensure that I create a space where we listen. Now, when I say create space, I'm not saying that we're all the same, then we come to that space. What I mean is that different people, blue, red, white, yellow, black, whatever, we all come to the space to listen. Now, the way we would do listening in Denmark may be different from the way we do listening in Canada. Even the way we do listening in Victoria, where I'm coming from, I'm beginning to realize it's different from how we do it here on the prairies. And that's because we're at different points in this conversation than one another. So I think that to go back to tie that to your question is that it's now understanding who are those in the room, what perspectives are in the room, and how can we come to that point where we truly listen. Listening is very critical for me, and I think that that's something that I find missing in all that we're doing. Now, of course, it's more than listening, obviously, but I think that the role of theater, in my own opinion, is to create that space to start having those conversations in meaningful ways that the community can then say that we've had this conversation, what next? Because I think that extraction many times happens that researchers go to communities, and this has happened tons. Like, I've done research on this, where researchers go to communities.
You've extracted the extractors.
Well, that's not how to put it. Where researchers go to communities and they just, they publish and, they keep moving up the ladder. So when I go to community and somebody asks me that question, I don't do as if it's not real. I let them know it's real. But I try to be transparent. I try to be honest as much as I can. Because there are realities around these things, right? You're a researcher, there are so many responsibilities that is involved. And even within the community, some might be interested in going down the, every step with you. Some are not interested, some are not. Recently I'm doing a project and I did tell the community, we're a community and we try to define that in nuanced way. And I said something, I said, ultimately, somebody needs to take the responsibility.
Yes.
Somebody needs to write that grant.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to put that poster on. Somebody needs to do that. Are you able to do that?
Yeah.
Right. So we need to start having, for me, that's why I say that my role is then to come to that community and create that space where we can start having those conversations in genuine ways that can hopefully produce results by bringing other stakeholders into it. That's a different conversation,
yes.
But bringing in other stakeholders that can actually move us forward.
And listen in different ways. What a fantastic idea that we speak different languages, but we also listen in different ways. Time for one more question, either from the folks here in Regina or over the live stream or in Saskatoon. Yes?
You mentioned George Orwell and do you have any other novels or plays or TV shows that maybe teach those listening philosophies that you're talking about?
I'll repeat the question just for the folks in the live stream. Taiwo mentioned earlier in the interview George Orwell's Animal Farm. The question was, are there any other novels, plays, pieces of art that teach some of the ideas that we're talking about in this interview?
Yes, there are a lot of them. And my own growing is not in this part of the world, so a lot of my examples might be very Nigerian or very African. And it maybe might be a way for folks to actually, go read more about it. The guy that won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1986, Wole Soyinka, wrote a play titled Death and the King's Horseman. It's a phenomenal play, and it's really based from the Yoruba cosmology and things like that. there is a filmmaker in Nigeria called Tunde Kelani, and he's written and done a lot of work around some of these ideas, really digging deep into Yoruba, ideas and how these things inform what we do. And he's done a lot of work. His name is Tunde Kelani. We're actually going to be screening his film sometimes March 18th in Regina. So that's sorry, I just plugged that in there.
Yeah. Shameless plug. That's okay.
I know,
so
right?
You're allowed. Yeah.
So I have some couple of examples like that, and again I read plays across, like I've read Arthur Fugard in South Africa, and different plays from different contexts. So I would say those are some of the examples that I can cite that are obviously not from here, but I think they kind of help us to start thinking about some of these ideas in meaningful ways and how people are able to navigate through cultures and dispensations.
Thank you for the recommendations. Last question for tonight. We could talk, really could talk to Taiwo all night, but last question for now, for this conversation, for this space that we've created. You mentioned your daughter. You have 2 children. So time to be a parent and a scholar and an artist. And your daughter doesn't see, you said, who's white, who's black, right? This idea of children not seeing color. How are you going to teach your children about race?
That's a good question, a tough one, because that question came to me some couple of years ago. Not that my daughter doesn't see color, I think her interpretation of color is really challenging us to rethink what we call white, the labeling. And that's a different conversation. But to answer your question is that myself and my wife, who's very amazing in taking care of the babies while I'm here with the grannies, we're very particular about the literature we introduce to her. So there is a series that I think they call it Big People, I can't remember the title, Big People, Great Ideas or something like that. They have a series of different people that have done things in past. Martin Luther King, we have so many of them. We're beginning to read that to her because we wanted her to see beyond just one person. I don't just want her to see people that look like me, that have done great things, whatever great is, but I want her to see varieties, all right? Of course, we encourage her. She asks questions. She's very curious. She asks questions, and we answer that hard the way we can. But I think recently something that has become, that my wife and I were talking about, is her hair. Because she keeps saying, why is my hair not this? Why is my hair not that? And one thing that we feel like is that our interaction in one way, that we don't want it to always be about race or racism, but I think that we're looking for those moments that we can chip things in and say, hey, have you thought about this and all of that? But what we're trying to do is to find a way to have those conversations. And she's like, Dad, what are you saying? Who is Martin Luther King Jr.? If you ask him, like, I know Martin Luther King Jr. Or you ask about other people, because we introduced that to her. And I think that's a great way to start introducing that to her and start listening, hearing stories of other people that have gone ahead. That's how we're doing it right now.
Beautiful, beautiful. Looking for moments, the language of listening, creating space. I told you that was my last question. Before we go back to end this episode, before we go back to Saskatoon, what is the question from you? What is the question that we should all be thinking about? If you had to give us one question on this topic of freedom.
I think in the context of all that is happening in the world right now and all that will still happen, I think it's worth asking ourselves questions individually. What does freedom mean to me in the context of my neighbor? What does it mean to you? So I'm changing it. It's not you now. What does it mean to you in the context of your neighbor?
Taiwo Afolabi.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Taiwo. Looking forward to many more conversations, many more created spaces. So grateful to have you in our province, and so grateful to be here at the Artesian in Regina on Treaty 4. Thank you to Creative City Centre as well, and Tyler Toppings, who work with us in partnership to make this part of the broadcast possible. And now, Laura, back to you in Saskatoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Taiwo. So wonderful to hear your conversation and to be able to be a listener as you shared your knowledge. It was great. So we've reached that time of the day, my friends, where we're just going to close things off for the evening. However, that being said, our hope always is that you use this night as a spark. We don't want this to be an event that ends when you go home or when you log off your computer. We want this to spark a dialogue. We want this to build community. And there's a few ways you can do that. So one of the questions out of Regina was, what are some great books on some of the topics you're speaking about? And we're really lucky that we have partners in both Saskatoon and Regina's public libraries. Our wonderful librarians at both locations have put together lists of books that they would recommend, or different resources that will help you to learn more about the things we've talked about today. And if there is something that's missing from the list and there's something that you're really excited and you heard tonight and it really inspired you, talk to those librarians. They are the most helpful, wonderful people in the world. I don't know where I'd be without a librarian. So definitely hit those lists up. You can check them out on Some Theatre's website, or you can go right into the branch. Another thing that you can do to get involved, we heard Taiwo talk about reciprocity and the importance of reciprocity, and we think about that a lot at Some Theatre because that's one of our core values. And so we talk about the importance of when you take something, you give something back. When you have something, you share it. When you know something, you teach. And so that's something that we're always trying to do. And so there's different ways that you can get involved with us. You can come and be an audience member at our locations when we visit. Again, all our programming is free. You can share the word on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also donate to Some Theatre or become a subscriber. So you can make a donation as an individual, or if you sign up as a monthly donor, your donations are matched. And that's what allows us to make this art for free for everybody and be able to pay all these fantastic artists you've seen here tonight. And the last way to get involved is if you're inspired by something that you've heard, or every month on the first of the month, we announce our theme for the upcoming show. And so if something inspired you and you have a poem, a dance, a rant, a song, anything that you'd like to share, please contact us and get involved. We always talk about how Some Theatre is here to build community. And so again, we heard that echoed by our comments from Taiwo tonight. And so I would encourage you this week, as you go out into your community, to find a way to connect with somebody in your community. At our Theatre in the Park shows, we always encourage a handshake with someone you've never met before. That's been a little tricky over the last couple of years. But that being said, think of something you can do for somebody in your community and just find a way to connect with one another. Because as Taiwo said, it's so important that we see each other as the human beings that we all are. So thank you for joining us tonight. We are Some Theatre.